Yes, thank you very much for coming. And especially everyone who come for the first lecture and stayed all the way to mine. I really appreciate it. And yes, today I will introduce Serverless and I will be using AWS Lambda. But before I do that, I would like to make a short self-presentation about who I am. So first, as I kind of already said, my name is Johannes Jarbratt. And I'm Code Chrysalis student now. I came here to Japan from Sweden just after graduating my Master of Science in Industrial Engineering and Management. And I started working here at a Japanese company. And I worked there for 4 years. I really enjoyed it and I learned a lot about not only work but Japanese culture, and something you can't get unless you work at a Japanese company. And I was the only foreigner. And one thing I really learned was that Japanese people love printing papers. And then putting it into the Excel. So they print the PDF, put it in an Excel. And I didn't love doing that, so I started writing VBA scripts and later also Python to automate this process. And while doing that, I discovered how much I love programming, and I thought it was so fun that I decided to quit my job and join Code Chrysalis. And here I am. Yes. So, what will I speak about today? A little bit of contents. First, I will talk about the definition of serverless and what it really is. And this could be a little more vague than some other definitions, but I will do my best. And then I will do a short presentation of why I chose AWS and Lambda to do for this presentation and introducing serverless. And then I will go through the benefits, or some of the benefits with serverless. And I also try to do something myself with serverless, so I will show a really short demo of an application I made. And then I will go into the drawbacks of serverless, because it's not only good, there's also some bad things about serverless that you should be aware of. So, definition, what is serverless? Well, serverless, the word is a bit of a misnomer, and because there are servers. Serverless things are things like cars, shares, houses, things like that, but things on the internet need servers to run. So even if it's called serverless, there's actually a server in the background. So anything without server? No, that's not serverless. But what more serverless is that the customer, the vendor, for example Amazon, who provides this service, for their customer, do not have to worry about the physical server. And not only that, they also don't have to worry about any virtual server, no setup, no configuration, any kind of that, no scalability. So scaling is also something you don't have to worry about when using this kind of service. So no matter how big or small your workload is, you don't have to worry about scalability. And this is an important point. The last one is this is when employing your application or function to the web. Because if you use internet and don't have to worry about servers, that could include software like Gmail. You don't have to worry about servers or Office 360, but that's not what I'm going to talk about. And this is more serverless for applications or functions. That's an important difference. So, why did I choose AWS and Lambda? First of all, AWS stands for Amazon Web Services. And is there anyone here who hasn't heard about Amazon? Really? And that's exactly my point. Yeah, and Amazon is one of the biggest web service provider in the world. If they're not market leader, at least they're in the top. And they have a huge library of services. So I tried Google, how many are there? And I couldn't find a number because they are expanding with new services all the time. So I just went in on and calculated them all, or counted them all, and there are over 150 different services. And Lambda is one of the services. They also exist in 21 regions. All the blue dots are different regions, and they have 64 zones. And the zone can be simplified as, it's a data center. And Amazon Web Services is constantly growing. Not only, and the serverless is something that's really growing lately. not only Amazon, but the market as a whole is growing. So their competitors is also growing on this market, especially Microsoft with their service Azure. If anyone has heard about it. Yeah, so Amazon Web Services is the market leader right now, and that's the reason why I chose them. It only makes sense. Yes, so what is Amazon Web Service Lambda? Well, it's a FaaS, and that stands for Function as a Service. So what Function as a Service can really be said to be is that you can have service at different levels depending on how much you want to do as a customer and how much you want to hand over to the vendor. And first we have infrastructure as a service, and that the vendor only takes care of the hardware and the virtualization, but all the other things is done by the customer. They have to set everything up. And then we have containers as a service. Then the vendor takes care of a little bit more, take care of the operating systems. And then we have PaaS, stands for Platform as a Service. They take care of a little bit more. And then we have Function as a Service, when the only thing that the customer has to care about is running your function on the writing your own code. There's also software as a service that's not in this, but that would be, for example, Google Docs or Microsoft Office 360. Yes, so a little bit more. Lambda is stateless, and that means that the software, when you call the software, it wakes up and it doesn't remember anything that has happened before you called it, if it has been called before or not. And once it has finished its work, then it shuts down again and it forgets everything that it has done. But the important thing is that you can have this your Lambda function write things to example to a database, and then on startup read from that database. So think about it: if you wake up in the morning and you have or you go to bed in the night and you forget everything you don't write in your diary. That would be a good non-technical comparison. And last of all, Lambda is used as a backend for other applications. That means if you don't put your whole application in something that's function as a service, because that's not really what it's designed for. Instead, you have this as an upload for your application. If there's something especially heavy to run on your server, then you put it in this serverless, and they take care of all of that for you. Yes, and a benefit, I already mentioned this a little bit, but it is scalability. Because maybe your function doesn't take so much hardware, so then you can have what you call a little worker who's do the work for you. And it doesn't get so much specification, but it's cheap to run. But if you have a more heavy-duty thing, you can get a bigger machine. And this is really easy to configure. It's just 2 button clicks, and you can totally change your specs. And you can have even more. But if you get a lot of traffic to your site, and you get to run up a lot of functions, then you can then there's automatically horizontal scaling. So you can get another one or another one, 4, 5, 6. And yeah, this is run automatically in serverless. So if your workload increase, you don't get downtime, it just grows horizontally to get the work done. Another benefit is that serverless is quite cheap. And if someone here has used serverless, they might say that it's not cheap, but I will come to that later. But with serverless, because you only run when, you only pay for when the function is running. Oh, sorry. So every time the function is called, you pay a little bit, and this is a real small amount, and it's great if you have heavy-duty tasks that are run occasionally. For example, if your application has really high demand in the morning and in the evening, then you would only pay extra money for the extra capacity during this time. But if you weren't using serverless but was paying for a server, then you would have to have this spare capacity all the time, and that would be expensive. So in this case, serverless is really cheap. And the third is time to market. And what I mean with this is, once you get used to the serverless framework and learn how to use it, then it's really, really easy to get your code up and running. So I made a few functions that I put on the serverless or Amazon Lambda. And the first time, then I had to learn how to use everything, and it took a while. It was quite hard, but the second and third one, it got so much quicker, and a lot of things are already preset for you for the first time you set it up. So you can have it running in really no time. And once again, you don't have to configure any servers or any virtual machines, or in Lambda's case, you don't even have to care about runtimes or containers. It's all done automatically for you. It also supports a lot of different languages, for example, Node.js and Python, Go, and a lot of other languages are all supported. So, yes, so a use case example could be file conversion. Let's stop this animation. Yes, so for example, if you have a site, let's say a recruitment site where people can upload the resumes, and maybe you want the resumes as a PDF because you can easily distribute it to everyone, but you don't want to limit your customer to only upload files in PDF files. You want to give them the possibility to upload, for example, Word files or open Office documents, and a lot of different kind of documents, maybe even images. And then you want them converted into PDF files. So PDF conversion is quite CPU heavy, and if you get a big load, your system will, it will be overloaded and it will probably crash. Unless, of course, you build out so you have the server capacity to do this. But that would mean that you have all this idling time when people are not submitting their resumes. Maybe during working days from 8 to 12 in Japan. But then you don't get so much, but after people get home from the work and they start submitting, then you need the capacity, or if your site goes down, they can't use it. And this is a perfect place to offload your main server and have this conversion function running in the cloud and serverless. And much thanks to auto-scaling. And that's one of the applications I did. So I refer to this, so demo. So I made this small little file converter. That's this server is running on my local host, but the file conversion is done on the Lambda. So I can choose here to just upload a file and here we have it. So I'll just convert this file and then send it to Lambda and convert it. And then after a while I get this little nice download link. And when I click this here, you can see everything is converted to PDF file here, and you can also see that I have it up on the Amazon sites. So this the file is sent to the Lambda serverless, and it converts the file and then put it into my S3 bucket. And S3 buckets, for those who don't know, it's just a file storing service that's Amazon offering. Yes. So drawback with functions servers and Lambda and serverless as well. One is response time. And what I mean with this is that when you're not using the function, it's not running. So every time you call it, it has to start up from zero. And this response time is Amazon says it's only 125 milliseconds, but that's also almost 0.13 seconds. So if you have time-sensing things that needs to be done really, really quick, then serverless is not for you, even if it's only happened with irregular cases. And especially if your serverless function is calling some other serverless function, then you get the double response time. And if you call the third one, then it's almost half a second in just getting your functions up and running. Yeah, and this is probably not the problem for most people, but if your things is time sensitive, you should know this. And another one is execution time, or runtime, how long your function can run. And Amazon has 15 minutes is the maximum that your function can be kept alive, and then it's killed off automatically. It suffers a timeout. And Microsoft Azure has only 10 minutes with a 5-minute standard. And this means that you can't have a long-running function running on your serverless. So that's also something most people will probably not run into this problem. But if you have like huge things you need to be done, then maybe serverless will not be for you. And the third thing that I would come back to before is that serverless can be expensive. So one thing is that to activate your function, for example, you have to use another service to activate your serverless function. And that could be an API gateway, and that one also costs money. And that could actually become more expensive for paying for the API calls than actually having your function running. That's one thing. And another thing, I like that. Yeah, and you also pay for every 100 milliseconds that the software started running. So if your function runs in 40 milliseconds, you pay the same amount as it would have run in 90 milliseconds. It will still be the same price. And also you don't pay when you're not using your function, but when your function is waiting for other function or services to call, to respond from call is made, it means it's still up and running. So if your serverless function calls another function that takes a lot of time to answer, then you have to pay for that waiting time. And that's also something to be aware of, especially if you depend on third-party things to answer. So I did an API call that took 7 seconds to respond, and yeah, that's not really nice. And the fourth one that's really important to be aware of is lock-in when using this kind of services. And everything has lock-ins, not only serverless. If you start using Windows and then start using Office, then you kind of locked into the Office system thing. And the same with serverless. And there's a few different things to be aware of. One is how you call the function. For example, if once again you call your function in the API call, then different vendors have different kind of APIs. So you might have to rewrite the application calling your serverless function if you move your serverless function, and not only just change the address, call this page instead of this. You might actually have to change how you call it. Another thing with the API gateway is that it's different between vendors how they hand over your call to your functions. So if you choose change vendor, then you might have to rewrite some of your code how it handles the information that it gets from the API or from other services. You can use, for example, events in S3 buckets or other kind of events. And the third kind of lock-in is service integration. So a lot of web service providers, they provide a lot of different services that can be used for data streaming and once again S3 bucket. And when they connect together, you can't just move this serverless function because maybe then to another vendor because maybe then you can't activate it. So that would mean you would either have to move one function, you would have to move all function or no functions. And if you make up a big complicated network of different function calls, this could be a real headache. So that's also something to be aware of. But once again, lock-in is not a reason to not look into serverless, but it's something to be aware of when you're looking into it. Yes, and before I end my talk, I would like to say that I'm unfortunately not employed at Amazon. So there are a lot of other great alternatives that I want to point out, even though I used Amazon in my demonstration. So for one, there is Microsoft Azure Functions. Amazon Web Services right now have 40% of the market share. They are the market leader in web services. But Microsoft comes in as second at 30%. And they are also growing really quickly, mostly because a lot of Fortune 500 companies in the US have started looking into this and looking into serverless. And they, for some reason, choose Microsoft instead of Amazon. There's also Google Cloud Functions, there's JSP and eBay Cloud Functions. And eBay is actually, their cloud function is built on an open source serverless framework that I feel is really interesting. It might be something you want to look into, especially if you're someone who cares a lot about the open source community. Yes, and that's everything to me. Here's my LinkedIn, my GitHub account, and my email. Please feel free to contact me if there's anything you want to ask. We will not have Q&A now, but as soon as I plug in this, you are more than welcome to come up and ask me questions. Thank you very much.